It's time for Muscle Nerds Education with Luke and Shane. Yeah.
We should do one where we do a Japanese dub movie. We talk like this the whole time.
Hello. Yeah.
We're gonna talk about. Oh God! All right. So today we were going to talk about HIIT training. What is HIIT training?
High intensity interval training. Otherwise, you may have seen it from many of your Instagram stars and celebrities. 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. That is definitely not HIIT training.
No.
No.
So HIIT training, high intensity, is it's in the name, right? So in order to have high intensity, you have to go hard, like someone has a gun to your head, right?
Go really hard, like when your wife says, go hard, and you're like, okay.
Right, and then you go for 5 seconds and you're done.
Yeah.
And then you need 5 minutes of rest. It's very similar to that, right?
30 seconds on, 5 minutes off.
That's it. So when we had our last program design class, I made a very poor judgment call and had you show people what a true lactate threshold test was on the rower. And not only did you almost break the rower, you almost broke yourself.
The real question, I guess, would be, did you die? No, we did not. Why? Because we're conditioned by muscle nerds.
That's pretty good. That was
You're
good product placement. So when we're doing high intensity interval training, the key is it has to be incredibly hard, right? And if you're doing 30 seconds of activity and you can recover after a couple of minutes or after 30 seconds, it's just interval training, right? Because it'd be the same thing as doing, say, a 3-rep max. You wouldn't do a 3-rep max with 90% of your 1-rep max and then, 30 seconds later do another one. That'd be ludicrous, right? And why can't we do repeated efforts of really heavy weights?
Just can't recover.
You got to be able to recover. So after you did that lactate threshold test, how long did it take you to recover?
For me, it took at least 3 to 4 minutes before I started to feel like I was ready to go again.
Yep.
But I definitely...
That's not what I recall.
3 or 4 days. There's definitely like an element where you have to be able to... You'll feel like the first minute coming off something like that, you feel okay. And you feel like, okay, this is not too bad. And then it actually progressively gets worse. Everything just accumulates. And so like your head starts to feel like it's swimming and you start to feel like your body's now catching up to that element of fear that you've just put yourself into. And so you need to be able to go to those places and you need to be able to push yourself, which especially for some of our clientele can be a challenge. And that's why you need to build them up to it. You don't just take Mary Muffin Top in. I'm going to use that because that's what you always refer to as Mary. In from the street, and you don't just like chuck her straight in and be like, all right, we're going to do 30 seconds, life or death. You go as hard as you can, because they just don't have the capacity to push themselves to those dark places, to keep going and to push through the pain and like instill that fear in themselves, like it's life or death.
I think part of the problem too is when you look at conditioning, when you look at really weight training and conditioning these days, people have forgotten the fact that you need a general physical preparedness phase where you get someone ready to actually do high intensity interval training. So if Joe Dingleberry came in and he says, I want to bench 200 kilos, you wouldn't put him on the bench and just do 200 kilos. You'd have to build him up into that over time. And you would do that through general prep phases where you would eliminate some of his weaknesses, get him used to the motor patterns, get him used to increasingly heavier and heavier amounts of weight, which is why primarily we start people off with building an aerobic base, getting them used to just general conditioning. Then as we go along the continuum, we do more and more specific conditioning and we work them into the point where they can actually handle a real HIIT training protocol. And for a lot of people, if you know how we do it, we typically use a heart rate monitor. So instead of just giving an arbitrary work to rest amount of time, so just giving somebody 30 seconds on and say, 3 or 4 minutes off, it's a bit more specific if we can utilize an app like the Polar Beat app and maybe a Polar H10, and we can watch how high their heart rate gets, and then we can watch it and make them go when it's time to recover. And what we find out from doing this is, let's say somebody gets on an Airdyne, right, which is probably the most brutal piece of equipment you could use for this. Make them go as hard as they can for 30 seconds. And what you'll find is a lot of people, it takes them 5 or 6 minutes to recover. And that being said, if we do something that's a bit more specific to people, we can make it truly personal for their conditioning. And then we have a metric of which to measure against to get them progress. So if you come in and you do 30 seconds on and you're dry heaving for 6 minutes and then your heart rate drops to 120, 130 beats per minute, then we put them on there again. In a few weeks' time, they're going to be able to recover much, much faster. So we can look at heart rate recovery, and then as they recover faster, then we can add more sets, right? So let's say I've had people, it might take them 20 minutes to do 3 sets, like 3 all-out sets of HIIT training, but within 3 or 4 weeks, they're able to do 6 or 7.
But I think that's something that's really important there as well. As you said, 3 all-out sets. And I think we can see a lot of clients who can come in and they think that they're doing HIIT training, or even just people who are training at the gym will just think that they're doing HIIT training, and they're going 30 seconds and they're going maybe hard, but not as truly hard as they can go. Right. They're not going again to that position of like really digging deep internally and mentally having to push as hard as they can, and within say 60 seconds they are ready to go again because they haven't pushed to that capacity where they've really truly challenged themselves.
And you've been through, you've got an exercise physiology degree, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so most people that I know that have gone through university have been on a Wingate before. Mm-hmm. Did you guys do Wingates? Mm-hmm. Okay, so can you describe what a Wingate is?
So Wingate, you pedal and you're starting on, like, if you just imagine a normal stationary bike, but a stationary bike that's got like weights hanging from the front of it, and those weights at the moment are completely out of the picture. You just pedal and you're pedaling along like a Sunday bike ride. You start to go as quick as you can and you keep going, and then someone pulls a lever and drops those weights, and that massive change in resistance just suddenly kicks in, but you're already going really, really quick anyway. So because you've now built up that speed, you're able to overcome resistance that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to generate on your own. Like, it would have felt a lot harder to keep pedaling. But so you pick up all of the speed and then someone just drops a weight, and now you're having to resist that, or you're having to fight through that resistance. And so everything feels infinitely harder, infinitely quicker. And so you can go to those positions of pushing and really push your body to new limits a lot easier than you would if someone just said, hop onto a stationary bike, turn the resistance up. Most people won't go as hard as they need to, but a Wingate really allows you to do that.
Yeah, you've already got that built up inertia, so when they drop, they can drop anywhere from 20, 30, 40% extra load on it that you would never be able to pedal without the inertia. And then you're cranking it, and then what happens when you get closer and closer to that 30 seconds? You start slowing down. Then you get off the bike, and it feels like you've just done a 2-hour squat session. Like your legs are slapping together, you can't walk straight. And then what's the original protocol? Is it 30 seconds on, 4 minutes off, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you think about that, that's true HIIT training. You're doing what's basically HIIT on steroids. You're doing super maximal HIIT, right? Now, I'm not saying that people need to do that to get the benefits of HIIT, but don't kid yourself in doing like 30 seconds or a minute and then doing that with a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio and think you're actually getting the benefits of HIIT, because you're not. You basically at this point, you're just interval training, right?
And something there as well is that let's look at what you're going to be able to push maximally on. If, for example, if I hate the rower, me going on the rower and trying to do 30 seconds max intensity on the rower is probably not going to be ideal, because I'm not going to be able to tap into that ability to really push. So if I'm someone who benefits a lot more or is naturally built more for sprinting, go and do sprinting as hard as you can for 30 seconds. So that may be like incline sprinting up a hill or something like that. It has to be something that allows the person to generate enough force over that 30 seconds, because otherwise you just peter along and they don't really push themselves as hard as they need to.
Yeah. What I like to do is I take people out to the track and I tie raw meat to them and I set a dingo after them. And then they start running a lot faster than they normally could. Yeah.
That works.
So they really push themselves.
Good.
Yeah. But and all this is stuff you need to build into. And like you said, if you hate a piece of equipment, it's probably not going to be the right one for you. And also, if you don't normally use that equipment, so if I have somebody that's never been on an Airdyne, that's probably not the best piece of equipment to put them on if they've been rowing a lot, right? So we'd have to do a prep phase with the Airdyne to get them to the point where mechanically they're efficient enough to push themselves hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In some places, dingoes are hard to come by, so not always an option.
Yeah, true.